Once again, an incredible book, and this one is called The Muscovites in California, or rather a demonstration of the passage from North America discovered by the Russians and of the ancient one of the peoples who migrated there from Asia. And this book is written by Jose Torrubia sometime around, I'm not sure, early 1700s. And one thing we should establish right off the bat is that Muscovites are Tartarians. A dissertation of the terraqueous globe. Chapter 3, the division of the habitable earth. Asia has the most land at 10 million square miles. And of all of the countries who own land, Tartary has more land than anybody, which includes the Chinese independent and the Muscovites, with by far 3 million square miles and the largest area of land. So the Muscovites are Tartarians, and definitely the largest chunk of Tartarians, then of course the Chinese or the independent. From a collection of maps circa 1700, here is a map of Muscovite. A tabula or map of Muscovite, and I probably mispronounced it, but it's the same exact area. Up here, there's a Muscovite, but if this is a map of the Muscovite area, this is the Tartarian land that it's likely talking about. And I've put what became Moscow, where Moscow is, but this other map has the majority of this area on it. The White Sea right here, and the White Sea as well. So all this area which wraps around modern day Moscow, somewhere down here, and of course all the way to the northeastern area. So all of this area is Tartary Muscovite, according to these old maps. And with the majority of Tartary's landmass falling under what they call Muscovite. So this can pretty much be translated to the Tartarians in California and a demonstration of them migrating there from Asia. This opusculum, titled The Muscovites in California, written by the Most Reverend Father Giuseppe Torribia, has been approved by two of our theologians by the order of Most Reverend Father in Christ. And although it's very small in volume, only 83 pages, it is very large for the great and abundant research that it contains. A captive of Francis Drake in 1759 had been put ashore due to an illness, from which he had found his way overland to New Mexico and central New Spain. And that, of course, is referring to the United States. They call it New Spain because the Spaniards were, wanted to call it their new land. But New Mexico isn't referring to just, our current New Mexico down here. This whole area seems to be called New Mexico, even up to maybe around Quiveria. So California along the coast, and once you get inland, it looks like that area is called New Mexico. So this guy had made his way overland to New Mexico, central New Spain. So he was in central North America, and he claimed to have heard of a nation of white-skinned people with horses, swords, daggers, and numerous large cities located toward the west of the strait. Now they thought it to be Muscovite Tartarians. And although the Morena account was apocryphal, the presence of Muscovites, which they're starting to call Russians now, to the west of North America was very real, and the search for furs and other economic resources led them overland into the United States, with the Pacific coast being reached in 1639. So, of course, with Arzareth being the area of Tartaria and Siberia, going east over the Bering Strait, they would come here, and we find cities. Cities marked here, and even further east we get into tents, which are described to be in the way of the Tartars. And the tents are where they don't have cities yet, and they're nomads seeming to roam around. But over here we have cities established: Axa, Quiveria, Christchurch, Tiburag, Takano, Pagul. Just like the cities are established on the other side of the Bering Strait, in the area where we know Tartarians have their towns and cities established. In fact, right here is a reference to the Naphtali Tartarians, who is from the lost tribe of Naphtali. And down here we have the Dan Tartarians from the lost tribe of Dan. It's likely that this here is Kambalu, and the capital city of the Tartarians. But more important, we can see that the cities are established over here in Canada and Alaska, and certainly stretching down into California. Here's Anchorage, Alaska, seems like. And moving south, of course, we get California and San Francisco, with cities scattered all throughout North America, Canada, and Alaska. And we should establish with certainty the migration of the men and animals to America, so it is very reasonable and useful to examine the passage discovered by the Russians to navigate from their country to California, which is the most northerly part of America. And that makes it sound like California is all the way up at Alaska, so which it may have been named that at one point. Here's California, and there's other than North America, this whole area is considered California. And here's another one of California's here, but going north from there in the Alaska area, there's just no other name for it. So I guess at one point it seems like this whole area all the way up to even Alaska seems to be called California. So at one point California seems to have extended to the most northerly part of America. And over the next few pages he pours over a history of John Davis, James Lancaster, Captain Hudson, 1612, 1614, 1615. All these guys are trying to find the passage from the northern Tartarian Sea down to the southern sea. And they did not believe it existed because over hundreds of years they failed to find it. Until the Muscovites in California. Whoever thought of it? Whoever said it? How can it be? Through where can they pass? Slow down, please. These questions, all in one breath, are far too many. On the other hand, they do not terrify me, nor do they make me deviate from my constant seeking of the reality of the passage of the Muscovites into California. Yes, those same Muscovites who show themselves to be so mighty in Germany, the same who are able to go with their ships over to California, because truly their last northerly regions which have harbors towards the South Sea are bordering with our North America. And in relation to Tartaria, he writes that although in his days the borders of Russian Tartaria were not yet discovered, he nonetheless thought that it without any doubt continued through Anian or some other strait to North America. And they put together a famous map which shows the voyage of the Chinese, and it can be noted that they accomplished it precisely in the year of 458 of our Common Era. Now, these Chinese could easily be Tartarians because the land where the Tartarians have their capital city is called Cathay, and Cathay is supposedly the old word for China, so there seems to be some kind of confusion between who is a Chinese and who is a Tartarian. But that voyage is shown on this map, the route of the Chinese to America in 458 of Jesus Christ, as I believe is what that means. And here again the Russians are debarked here in 1741, and after the Chinese got here they called it
Fao Sang, so Fao Sang of the Chinese. And supposedly they left from an area called Liu Tong, and they were always within sight of land. They never went far away from land, even passing Japan and all these. They basically went through shallow waters and were close to land the entire route. Here's that area right here. Of course, nowadays it's Canada, but Fao Sang of the Chinese. And one more example, the Sea of Tartaria with the Bering Strait over here. And in North America or Canada, we have Fao Sang, the colony of the Chinese. And the land of North America is close to the most northerly land of Asia through a strait that is now being named North. And one can see that the geographers of those nations knew not only their navigation, but also that the Tartars were speeded from their ports to the ones in North America. All of this can be gathered from the documents of the Japanese and the Chinese.
When dealing with the passage or transit made by the Indians to America, he says, I found in the histories of Muscovy and Japan that in some very ancient wooden geographic plans or maps, these parts or America can be seen delineated as continents. So in ancient Tartarian maps, North America is shown as a continent. And it says that their ancestors passed over to America on rafts, what are made from a certain kind of wood, sometimes large and round with trunks almost a foot in diameter, and they're very light. They're named puero by the Indians, and the material is found in abundance in the easterly shores of Asia as well as America, and this information was written to him from Tartary. The very vast empire of the Russians or Muscovites or Tartarians is extending its boundaries to the last most northerly lands of Asia above the South Sea, and they're also coming to the port at Kametachaka, and from there the Muscovites go on to Japan, and from there they eventually get to the Cape of San Sebastian, which is considered the land of California. So it's saying the Tartarians are coming from up here in the northern sea, conquering the land up here, of course, and they're coming down this way, following this path into Kametachaka, and from there they can go to Japan and all the way over to California. On the newest maps of Mr. Dial brought to the press in 1752, not only this voyage is taken into reference, but also the other one made by the same Muscovites in the year of 1731, in which they discovered the Strait of the North, by which America and Asia are united. That is seen on this map. Here is the Sea of Kametachaka, but the land of Kametachaka is here, and the route that the Russians took from Kametachaka in 1732, and they went up through the Bering Strait. And both of these are routes from Tartarians. This is a route to America from Kametachaka in September 1741, and this is another one, a route from Kametachaka to America by a Tartarian captain, Tartarian, and this one happened in 1741. And this map is made by two guys working together. These two guys right here, Guillaume Delal and Philip Bausch. And concerning the passage of the Tartarians to America, Delisle read before the Royal Academy of Paris in April of 1750 about the discoveries made by the Russians to the north and east of Tartary and to the north and west of America. So the Tartarians have made discoveries northeast of Tartaria
and northwest of the United States. Of course, we're talking about this area right here. And the author proceeds with a translation of Delisle's speech. Between the unknown lands and seas, there are none worthier to be discovered than those which lay north of the South Sea. And for 2 centuries, the English and the Dutch have been trying to find a passage from the northerly coast of Tartary down through a strait into North America, but little progress has been made, which led to Peter the Great setting up an expedition in order to inform himself of the boundaries of Tartary to the northeast and find out if it was contiguous, united, or only very near to America. For this enterprise, he chose Mr. Bering, and Bering received his orders on the 5th of February, 8 days after the death of Peter the Great. Now, Captain Bering spent 5 years on his expedition, and Bering did not find the United States, but he told me in his own words that he received all possible indications of a coast or a land to the east for various reasons, because of the trees that he found and the fish that they caught, as well as the birds that arrive on the eastern coast of Asia. And then they return over to America when their time arrives. So although Bering didn't find it, they do believe that there is land to the east of Kametachaka, all the way to the coast of America, to the north of California. And Delisle suggested that Bering go on an expedition east of Kametachaka to find the lands which he had received so many indicative signs in his first voyage. And he began his voyage in 1741, but he didn't make it far because of a storm. So they turned back to Kametachaka, but wrecked their boat, landed on an island which is now called Island of Bering, and that's where Bering died. So leaving from Kametachaka, Bering did supposedly find the Bering Strait, although he didn't go any further east to get to this part of Alaska. He turned back and came back to Kametachaka, and then leaving Kametachaka, he goes east to find land by going this way, and that's when they had to turn back and got here to the Bering Island where he died. And doing a search for the Bering Island in Kametachaka, Russia, we could see that it's right down here. And only a few could escape death, and they went back to Kametachaka with great difficulty on a small boat they had put together with the remains of the broken ship. So Bering Island down here where he died, and they made a perilous voyage on broken ship pieces back to Kametachaka over here. But that is where the name Bering Strait comes from, and apparently he had sailed what looked like between this island and the portion of Tartary here, and came up here, turned around, and came back because he didn't find America. Other names for the Bering Strait are the Strait of Anian, as well as the Strait of the North, but nowadays we just call it the Bering Strait. Concerning the third navigation made from Kametachaka to America, this one was done by a Russian or Tartarian captain named Alex Tachirikow, who had been a lieutenant of Captain Bering. And after 41 days of navigation, they arrived with the sight of land, what they believed to be the coast of America, at 55 degrees north, the Bering Strait being at 65 degrees. We need to drop down 55 and 36 minutes. This puts him somewhere around here, which is Bristol Bay, or this small area of Alaska. And looking at this area, you could think that if the water was a little bit lower, there would be a lot more land exposed through here. Maybe even enough for a land bridge over this area. So these maps that show, kind of an exaggerated landmass here, maybe at one point there was a bigger landmass here, and over time it has either sunken or the water has risen, so that it's a much, of course, more slender area now. And it makes sense how in the year 458, the Chinese, or the Tartarians, which from Liu Tong is north of the Great Wall. So this would be in Tartary, and it's calling them Tartarian Chinese. So these guys, it's unknown if these are Tartarians or Chinese, but they're north of the Great Wall, which puts them in Cathay, which likely means that they're Tartarians. They're leaving Liu Tong, and like we previously said, following very close within land, so they basically could see land the entire route until they get over here to America. And that seems that they were following where Bering was trying to go, east of Kametachaka, following these lands all the way until you get over here to America. Nevertheless, this Tartarian captain is somewhere right around here, Bristol Bay, at 55 degrees north. And here, this place is where it is not known if anybody else has ever arrived before them. And they attempted to get near the land, but the ship couldn't come any closer than 1 league. So after about 8 days, he resolved to send in a rowboat of 10 men, well armed with a good pilot. But as soon as they landed, they disappeared and were never seen again, even though the ship remained in the sea for many cross sailings, and in all, the surroundings during all the month of August, awaiting their return until the point was reached when the Tartarian captain, having lost hope for ever seeing them anymore, decided to retreat. And on his return, for many days, he saw land very far away, which is shown on the maps. So likely somewhere around here, and maybe even over here near British Columbia, because this is also 55 degrees north. Anyways, they, sent out the rowboat, and who knows what happened to those guys. I guess it's possible by the mid-1700s, Indians had taken them and killed them, but those guys disappeared and were never seen again. And where Bering had left and made his first voyage, the Russians dared to try it again in 1731 and to follow the same course he had taken. But they obtained better results than Bering and greatly advanced the discoveries towards America, because once they arrived at the point where Captain Bering had been, they directed themselves exactly to the east, where they found an island, and after that, a very vast land. And as soon as they sighted it, a man came to meet them in a small boat similar to those of the Greenlanders, and wishing to inform themselves of what country they had come to, but they were unable to find anything out other than that there were many animals bearing furs for clothing there. And they followed the coast of that continent for 2 days, sailing south without being able to find land. And then because of a storm, they were forced back to the coast of Kametachaka and found them obliged to return to the place from which they had departed. And this ends the quotation of Mr. Del Isle when he was giving his speech. So from all of this information, the maps, the speeches, the exposition of both authors, and especially the letter of a Muscovite captain, it is possible to certainly prove that first, the Muscovites can openly exit from the river Lena, which is 73 degrees to the north of Russian Tartary, and go there with small boats and ships to the Strait of the North, which is under the polar circle, and continue navigation to Kametachaka. So they're saying that the Tartarians can leave Tartary to the north, go into the northern Tartarian Sea, and sail down to Kametachaka. So from this, they know that there has to be a strait through here. The Tartarians know about it because they're getting their ships from the northern Tartarian Sea down into the port or the Sea of Kametachaka. And in the history of Tartary, whose author was a Swedish officer who for many years was prisoner of the Muscovites, he wrote that it was believed until now that Asia to the northeast was united with North America, and that because of this, it was impossible to pass from the northern glacial sea to the Sea of the East. And because now we know that the Tartarians can pass from the northern glacial sea down to the peninsula of Kametachaka, we know with evident certainty that America is indeed not united with Asia. The fact is that the ships of the Muscovites from the north come nowadays and trade in Kametachaka and places of the Sea of the East.
It is necessary that in order to make this transfer from one sea to the other, to pass through the strait that is situated between the mainland and a great island located to the northeast of Cape Sutoinos. This is the part of North America which lies to the east of that strait. So they had believed that it was all land through here, so there was no way to pass from the northern Tartarian Sea down into this southern or eastern sea. But they're saying, of course, because those Tartarian boats are arriving in Kametachaka, there has to be a strait somewhere through here. And second, that the Muscovites have sailed and can sail from their coasts and ports not only to California, but also to Southern America, down in Panama, Chile, etc. And passing through the Strait of Magellan, they can reach the ports of the Mediterranean, and a result of that, all the way up into Spain. So now they say that the Tartarians leave from Tartary to the north, go to the Northern Sea, come through the strait, they go to Kametachaka, they also go east over to America, they follow America all the way to the south, and they come through here through the Strait of Magellan, and then can continue this way, I guess back north all the way up into the Mediterranean and into Spain. And a note down here says that in 1640, 2 Russian ships passed through the strait called the Strait of the North. But that information never made it to Mr. Bering, because if he had been in possession of it, he would have not been satisfied with his voyage during the year of 1728, and he would have continued to keep going ahead and entered through the Strait of the North and into the Glacial Sea. And also the early inhabitants could have passed from Tartary to America through the strait in their little rafts, which we have documents in hand, and possibly that they came over on blocks of ice separated from the island, which they call Celebi. And Father Abril testifies and explains how the people, which is now called Russian Tartary, could have made such a crossing because they hunt the walrus, and when they go to hunt these monsters on those parts of the Glacial Sea, the hunt demands a lot of attention and time, so they bring along their whole family, and it happens quite often that, being surprised by the thaw, they are transported far away by the masses of ice which separate them from the others. So these guys are out hunting walruses on chunks of icebergs, and then the iceberg breaks off and takes them over to America. I have no doubt that some of the hunters have been transported on these floating masses towards the part of America which lies farthest to the north and not too distant from Tartary, Asia, which ends in the Sea of Tartary. And some of these islanders, because of their greed for money, expose themselves to the danger of being transported to a foreign country. Now he says we have documents in hand. That B is a reference to a very curious and rare work in Dutch, which is called Noord- en Oost-Tartary. And of course I had to track that one down here, right here, the bilingual edition. Unfortunately, the bilingual means Dutch and Russian, and I don't speak either one of those. So we still need an English version of Noord- en Oost-Tartary, but it comes with a map and high quality scans. Here's the front page of that book, and really a fascinating book on Tartaria. But being unable to read it, I switched over here, and we can see some of what they were talking about. Anyways, here the Tartarians are hunting the walruses or seals. They've apparently brought their whole family out here onto the ice. And if one of these breaks away, it may just float them all the way over to America. Or they could just take maybe these little boats and make it across the Bering Strait. But a fascinating collection of Tartarian pictures and illustrations. Here's one right here, a skull of a certain unknown animal found under the surface of the earth. In my curiosity cabinet, I have a head with 2 horns bigger than that of a bull, which was found very deep in the soil. So not sure what exactly this is, if it's bigger than a bull, but some kind of an animal. Not sure what the hole at the top of the skull's for. I see one here as well as here. Maybe a hole for a non-parietal eye. Nevertheless, this is the reference here on Noord- en Oost-Tartary, and definitely a fascinating book. But also, the migration of people and animals to America could easily be accomplished without any sort of miracle, because we know that in due season the seas freeze so firmly that they make possible the people living in North America to go over the ice in order to make their commercial exchanges. And this is not only probable, but we could say is a proven fact if we find written in the journals of Father Charlevoix, who says after the Jesuit Father Grelion for some time worked in the missions in New France, he transferred to the missions of China. And one day he was traveling towards Tartary. He met a woman he had known in Canada. And he asked her how could she have been brought to a country so far away from her own country in Canada. So somehow she had came from Canada over into Tartaria. And she said that she was captured in war and had been brought from nation to nation all the way until she got to Tartaria. And a very similar case occurred to him where a Spanish woman from Florida told him that she had been captured by barbarians, went from country to country and from nation to nation, passing through very cold lands until she arrived in Tartary, where she married a Tartar who brought her with him to China at the time of the conquest. So we have a Spanish woman from Florida. She's probably came over from Spain, maybe in 1492 with Christopher Columbus, and made her way over here to Florida. She's captured by the barbarians, they say, and is taken from nation to nation until she gets to a very cold place and eventually finds herself in Tartary, where she marries a man who then takes her down to China at the time of the conquest. So pretty solid evidence that the Indians that we call in America, when Christopher Columbus and the European colonists had came over, those Indians had to have a connection to the Tartarian people, because that lady captured down here in Florida somehow made her way across the entirety of the United States of America, the entirety of Canada, crossed the Bering Strait, probably a boat to the northern Tartarian Sea, where she was brought to Tartary and found her husband. And this reminds me of certain stories of white women being captured by the Native Americans. And, the stories about them are pretty horrific. They come and captured a white woman and do a massacre, just kill them or take their scalp. Or I'm sure you're familiar with the horror stories. But here we get a much different account that they, she obviously was a prisoner, but she was taken all the way over to Tartary. So obviously against her will, but maybe not that bad of a life if she was taken over and now has a husband and is traveling with her husband down to China. So they have reached the conclusion that the land of America is not too far from the east of Kametachaka, and they are inhabited, considering that the natives of the country attacked and killed, as proven by the fact that the men never returned from their rowboat. Moreover, that the ancient Chinese documents state the same Chinese navigated from the harbor of Liaotong to California, and they were always very close and never losing sight of the shores. Of course, a reference, as we have seen earlier, to this journey from Liaotong all the way over to California, where they stayed very close to land the entire time, and arriving what they call Fusang, China, over here in Canada. Already, Mr. Bausch has demonstrated that a certain Russian Navy officer, who happened to be the author of a letter published in French recently in Berlin under the title Letter of an Officer of the Russian Navy to a Gentleman of the Russian Court, he protested because he declares that North America is called New Russia, and that all vast regions that he had discovered with his Russians in the year 1741 east of Siberia, here being Siberia, of course, east of that, Canada and North America, and the people there were not subjected to any king. So in no time, they started to give names to the countries and dispute the right over North America. And this is why the Muscovite Tartarians were beginning to cause us Spaniards concern in the Sea of California. And although we're halfway through the book, this is the end of the book because the rest of it is the original Moscovite nella California, of course, in the original language, and the first half of the book is the translation in English. So with that, we have a pretty thorough history of how the Tartarians made their way to California. So it's not too far-fetched to proceed from there onto this video, the Tartarian city of San Francisco, where we theorize that San Francisco, of course, is a Tartarian city. So if you haven't seen that one, I do suggest it. And we'll wrap up this video. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.